Alrighty. Well, I guess we can probably get started chatting. Looks like we got a good amount of people in here already. Cool. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Wanted to uh, get on a call and be able to talk through a lot of the stuff that's happened in the last 48 hours, a lot of the stuff that came out about just soft giving, but I don't want to, I'm not, the point is not to have a conversation about soft giving, more about um, thinking through best practices, but also answering questions. Wanted to make sure that people have clarity and be able to. Obviously, I can't answer like questions on what they did, but just general charity questions. I see we have a lot of charities in here, so there's an opportunity to use this situation to add some added education and awareness and transparency to the industry, which I think is a cornerstone of kind of what we do, trying to get stuff out here. So here, let me bring in Spencer, who's here. I'm gonna let you be able to speak. We can chat a little bit. Spencer?
Hello.
Hey, man. So I figured maybe we can chat a little bit and kind of share. I mean, maybe you can sort of introduce yourself and your background a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Spencer Covey. I'm the manager of charity live streaming for the Fisher House Foundation. I've got a background in nonprofits, streaming, social media, all that for 5 years now, combined, and working with streamers and creators every day to raise money for charities and or for our foundation, for a very specific charity. And to bring attention and money into the foundation to do good and really to do it in a way that is transparent and honest. So
So, I mean, what I guess based on this stuff, I mean, you've been kind of vocal on Twitter for a little bit,
for a while.
yeah, about soft giving. I mean, I guess maybe explain as from your perspective as a charity why it's not a situation that you were promoting.
Yeah, so I actually had a chance to speak with Soft Giving when I was working at my previous charity March of Dimes, and we were looking at different options. I mean, just kind of weighing to see. We were using Tiltify at the time, and when they can continue to do Tiltify today, but it was just seeing what all the things were options available were at the time, and we wanted to see what Soft Giving was because partnerships are popping up, and people were talking about it a lot more. So the conversation was around. What can we add to the roster here? And after speaking with them and kind of hearing a bit about how they handle things and being told very similar to things that are being shared in the leaks and being talked about in the Twitter space right now, we decided it wasn't the best avenue for us. The organic growth, though it does take more time, is a much more one. I would argue a much more ethical and honest approach to doing it, but also a much more real connection to fundraisers and to donors. So working with people and telling them, here's what we do. Please work with us if you want to work with us and support our charity. If it resonates with you, please be a part of that. We want to bring you on board and make you feel like you belong. And we don't need a third party to go out and offer, incentives or whatever. We can offer them through donations through other brands and companies that want to be a part of our organization and our sphere in general. And again, coming back to the 50%, that was a very large cut to ask for. I was a bit of sticker shocked when I saw that. So
Yeah, that's the highest number
didn't
I've
did
ever
not
seen.
like that.
I've
I've never seen it higher than that before ever. I mean that was I saw that number and I was said, "Are you?" I mean I heard the number when I was told about it and I saw the contract afterwards, and I thought this is insane to me. And I mean clarification on it. Is this normal? Is this like just a random number you're pulling out of the air, or what is this? And it was, no, this is pretty standard. Some of our longer contract partners have a slightly lower rate, maybe 5% difference, but it's pretty standard for this, pretty boilerplate.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of the norm. You know what it reminds me a lot of is before I started Tiltify, when I was consulting, I used to do a lot of physical events and galas and
Mhm.
golf tournaments and those types of things.
Sure.
And that was a little bit more like there's definitely events where the charity I work with would spend, $500,000 for an event that raised $1 million. It was,
Right.
not a great return, which is one of the reasons why I started Tiltify, trying to cut down on event
Hmm.
costs. But, it reminds me of that model. And I know Zach Busey in his video was kind of going over an article with the CEO of Soft Giving earlier, where he sort of made the analogy that charities are held to a really high standard. And in reality, if you
Hmm.
spend $100 and you make $101, you're profitable and that should be good. Um, but I think that's an odd way to think of charity.
Yeah.
And the charity space, but like the charity space is a business. Um, you know, that's it's a multi-billion-dollar business. But the purpose of charity and the reason why charities don't pay taxes is because of what they're doing. And
Right.
that's why the sort of, I think, the expectations of return is so high. But it also brings me to another thing, and I know there's a lot of people in here that may want to weigh in on this. If you do, feel free to request to chat. I see Morale and Ali and a couple of other awesome people in here. Is I want to sort of touch on the so I've known about this stuff for a while, and because when you're in the space, you kind of just know the space, and you know what's going on. And obviously, in the space, you knew that there was a company that had come in and was paying creators, and we would talk to a lot of charities, and they're like, "Oh, this organization is paying creators to do it, and they're essentially making it more enticing, and is that a good path to go down?" And I just want to give sort of my personal opinion, and would love to hear other people's sort of thoughts on it. My opinion was always that this is bad for a couple of reasons. One, there's a ton of studies that exist, especially in the charity space, but just in general, that the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Um, at the end of the day, you're not going to have a long-term relationship with a fundraiser um, for essentially a market value relationship. You have to create a relationship that um, gives you the opportunity to grow for an intrinsic reason, not an external reason. And I think that's one is important, but two, um, I also thought there was other issues with paying because of uh, the professional fundraiser or paid solicitor laws, which were touched on a little bit in Zach's thing as well. That is something that I brought up to. I remember I was talking to someone from Power Spike about this, and it's like if you're soliciting in a state, you have to register in that state. And Soft Giving mentions that they're registered in Georgia, but just because you're registered in Georgia, that only means you can solicit in Georgia. That doesn't mean you can solicit in all the other states. I think depending on the rule, there's somewhere between 37 and 42 states, including DC, that people technically have to register to be a paid solicitor. And I find that it's putting creators at risk by potentially putting them in the line of fire of that law and rule that they have to follow, which is also just not, to me, that was just starting to roll a ball down the hill that's not going to be a scalable option. Um, and I
Hmm.
see Ali, I see you kind of jumped in. Did you want to add some stuff? Hey, Ali.
Sure. What I would add as my take on paying creators is just a little bit different. I think that there's a way to do it, one in which does not result in a like solicitor or required registered agent of the charity. But the big thing to come out of this is that creators cannot demand transparency and that 100% of the funds raised for charity go only to their programs, but then also expect to be paid, because the money does have to come from somewhere. And in this situation, a bad actor was allowed to use the laws and systems that exist that are very outdated to take advantage of multiple groups and to create give themselves more power than they should have been able to have, because we're not asking critical enough questions in this space.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point as well. It's like, if you're going to be upfront about it and tell everybody what's going on and they choose to do it, like if, someone was fundraising and they said, look, 50% of everything you donate is going to this, or this is happening, or this is happening, and someone still wants to donate, there's obviously no issue there with that person if they want to do it. I think it definitely sounds like the issue, a lot of it is whether people knew about it, and I see that Noah is going to jump on as well, which I'm happy about, because Noah can jump into the legal stuff better than I can. But I also feel like there's something missing in the conversations between agents and managers, because I'll say personally, since this stuff's out there, I'm just sort of putting most of it out. I've spoken to a lot of agents and managers, and I've told this stuff is going on to a lot of agents and managers, and I feel like they just didn't want to hear it at the time. And I just don't know what they're advising their clients. But, Noah, maybe you can sort of shed some light also on, like, what's the requirements? If you are getting paid, what do you have to do?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Noah, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not yet your lawyer necessarily. So anything I'm talking about today is for informational purposes only and is not specific legal advice. All right. Now that I did that, wanted to kind of chime in for a couple of things. One, we kind of touched on the need to register as a professional fundraiser, and the speculation that Soft Giving is only registered in Georgia, which is their home state. I know that Soft Giving has 3 different legal teams. One is their litigation team where they sue people.
Oh, that's fun.
Yep. The second is their team that kind of handles the general business stuff. And then they actually have an attorney that they work with just for professional fundraiser registrations. The status of how many he has filed, I'm unsure of, but I do know that they did seek out counsel just for that, for this model. So they might be registered in multiple states. Kind of diving into the topic of what you need to disclose if you are receiving payment for fundraising. There's several models that you see out there. One is, hey, I give you money, you go fundraise for me. It's the idea of, hey, they're likely going to fundraise more than we're paying them. That's the goal. And so we're going to pay them this certain amount. And then there's also like a weird hybrid model where it's, hey, we're going to give you $50K and you can donate that money to the charity you're fundraising for, or you can keep all of it for yourself, or some hybrid in between. And either way, if you are creating content and you're out there as a content creator fundraising for a charity and you have received payment, you have to disclose that, because you are receiving something valuable in exchange for your endorsement. So under FTC guidelines, you have to hashtag add that. Now, my understanding is that certain companies who have worked with agents in the past, and obviously I'm not going to go out here and name any in particular, indicated that wasn't the case at least a few years ago. Now, that might have changed since. However, no matter what an agent or a charity or a platform tells you, you have to disclose if you are compensated for fundraising. It's actually kind of funny. I have right in front of me St. Jude Play Live's influencer guidelines, which include hashtag St. Jude Ambassador and stuff like that, reminding you that you do have to disclose that you are a St. Jude Ambassador in a clear and conspicuous manner at the beginning of posts, above the fold, and at the beginning of a video and multiple times throughout. So even for Play Live, you have to make sure that you're doing that, even if you're not receiving express cash. So if you receive a gift box, you need to disclose it because it's something of value. If you unlock some sort of deliverable where, like, hey, I raised $10,000, I get a chair or something like that. You have to disclose that too. So all of these disclosure requirements will apply to professional fundraising as well. Just kind of chime in there.
Do you have to disclose like amounts, or basically if you're getting paid, you just have to put #ad, and that's sort of the
Yeah, you
compliance?
effectively
Yeah.
have to make it very clear that you received compensation for your endorsement. Usually that takes the form of #ad or, charity name partner or something like that. That is the best way to do it. And so you don't have to say how much you were paid, because that can actually confuse the issue slightly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one other question I wouldn't mind asking you while you're here, just because I heard this. So
Yeah.
as we watch this and I see on Twitter, which, is really upsetting, that a lot of creators are surprised, obviously, didn't know this was happening, whatnot. Do you know if there's any requirement to, disclose anything from, from this, like if Soft Giving is paying someone to fundraise and saying that 100% of money is going to thing, but is there a requirement to disclose any further, or is that just sort of more of an ethical question than a legal question?
Let me kind of dive at that question from a different direction. When it comes to working with a particular charity platform, no matter what you do, you have to accept some form of contract. At Tiltify, you guys have very staunch and good terms of service. Soft Giving, and when they're doing specific work with broadcasters or YouTubers or whatever it might be, it tends to have a contract that they have with these people. And as a creator, my informational advice, I'll say, is read your contracts and understand them. If you are not capable of understanding them because they are dense and full of legalese, then consult a professional. We do not bite. And because no matter what you agree to, you've agreed to it. So you've agreed that you understand what is in that contract. So you can't say you're surprised if you've signed an agreement. Now, perhaps there was something untoward that happened. Maybe you were given the agreement and told, hey, just flip through it and sign it real quick. You're still responsible for knowing what's in there, including if that includes an exclusivity clause saying that you can only use a particular platform for a certain amount of time, which would be potentially unethical in itself. Now, if Soft Giving were to, for example, claim that there was no compensation when compensation was very directly given, there could be a claim there for fraud or violation of FTC or something like that.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to sort of dig deeper into that, but was just curious, just so everyone knows sort of what the requirements are as we go down. I think. Sorry.
Hey,
Yeah.
Michael, that real quick, I can
Yeah.
pop in real quick. Hey, no, I have a question for you too, just to clarify. So I totally understand what you're saying about the compensation and needing to make that clear, because that is a very important thing to clarify in this space, especially. Is if a creator is doing a charity stream, so for instance, for Soft Giving, if they were offered compensation but declined compensation, would they still have to disclose that, or is it just if they accepted it?
There's nothing that stops a streamer from declining that compensation. And if they were offered compensation but declined it, if they're not receiving any compensation whatsoever, then there's nothing to disclose. So you wouldn't have to disclose.
Gotcha.
Great question, by the way.
Awesome. I think the other thing I wanted to chat about as well is I want to kind of talk about DAFs a little bit. I know Ali did a post about this as well. And I put out a little sort of graphic yesterday, because I think there's a lot of confusion about flow of funds. And, to get into the sort of transparency of it, I think it's important to talk a little bit about what DAFs are. So for anybody who doesn't know, DAF is short for a donor advised fund, which is essentially an investment vehicle in its sort of existence. But it's used to, it's a public charity that's usually established that allows donors to make charitable contributions and essentially receive immediate tax deductions that are then used to send to charities via recommended grants. So you send money to a DAF, you say the money I want here is to go to St. Jude. The DAF, assuming all their rules and guidelines have been followed, they send it to that. A lot of the DAFs that exist are designed as facilities for people to put cash and non-cash assets in to be liquidated and then take that tax write-off and then send them over to charities like the Morgan Stanleys, the Charles Schwabs, the Fidelity Charitables, the Vanguards. Those are probably the ones that most people haven't heard of. Unless you work at a charity, then you know all of those. But that's what a lot of people use them for, right? They have their money in an investment account and then they put it into this other account so they can take the tax deduction and then move it over. That's sort of typically what the majority of DAFs are used for in the US. Like billions and billions of dollars are sent to charities through those things. And those are good things for charities. It helps get money to people to be able to spend money. But I think the other thing to clarify too is there's sort of DAFs are also used a different way. So we've got like the PayPal Giving Fund, which Twitch Charity and GoFundMe use. Then we have Gavenga. I know there's a couple others in the mix that get involved with different things. And those are middlemen that essentially allow you to make a donation. But I think a lot of the confusion around what's happened in the last few days is where Soft Giving and Gavenga, at least in that example, sort of collide and sort of who's doing what. So I just wanted to kind of dive into that as well and clarify, and if anybody has any questions on that. Essentially, the money goes to this third party. The YouTube button works this way. Facebook fundraising works this way. It's a very common thing that happens, but also be aware that your money's going to somewhere else. And usually you could see this by looking at the receipt. Like if you donate and it went to the PayPal Giving Fund, your receipt and the information that you see, the legal, will say the PayPal Giving Fund. You may be doing it on behalf of or essentially directing the DAF to grant that money to, Wounded Warrior Foundation, but you're not donating to Wounded Warrior Foundation. You're donating to the DAF, and the DAF is going to grant your money. And they're fine things to have. I just think there's sort of some explanation was important to put out there of what that middle person is. And knowing that, like, at least for us at Tiltify, I've resisted using them for a long time because there's some other drawbacks. And I don't know if there's any charities here that want to sort of jump in on this question as well. But I also hear a lot from charity organizations that it sometimes can be difficult to track down the money when it goes to a DAF. So, sometimes using them can be problematic or confusing because they have to, basically they're shielded from the information a lot of the time and can't really figure out sort of what's happening. Spencer, did you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, not to go, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on the DAFs just in general from other organizations who are here, but from the Twitch tool perspective, we've used that a lot in the past few months, or I wouldn't say a lot comparatively, but we have gotten more use out of that in the last few months with people running their own events through the Twitch tool, and obviously that goes to the PayPal Giving DAF. But to your point that it is very hard to get a lot of information out of that, a lot of the reporting that we get from Tiltify and Donor Drive are very straightforward, very much who's giving the donation, how much is being given, who's it being given to, which campaign is it going through on the platform, and how much it is and all that. But with the PayPal Giving DAF, we've had an issue of, okay, somebody gave $10 to somebody. Who gave it? We don't know. Okay, who did they give it to? We don't know. Okay, when did it come through? Anytime in the last 30 days of reporting. So that really, to me, and that really cements the fact that we've already talked about that there is a lot of transparency issues with the DAF, especially on a platform like this with such smaller giving. or not to diminish donations, obviously, but when people are giving deaths like $500,000 and estates and things like that, that's different than people giving 10, 5, $15 at a time on a charity stream. So when we have this lack of transparency, it can be a big problem, not only from an ethics and a tracking standpoint, from the internal reporting standpoint, from the charity side. So
Appreciate
So I just
stuff. Yeah, go ahead, Allie.
I was just gonna say that I wanted to jump in that it sounds like DAOs are really scary and that inherently they create problems. And I really want to highlight like how useful they can be when a company like YouTube, Facebook, Twitch partners with a donor advised fund. The reason that they're doing that is because those donor advised funds are experts. In the case of PayPal Giving Fund, for example, is an expert in ensuring that charities are up to date and all legally still charities. When Amazon Smile still existed, on one of their pages, they explicitly stated they do not make sure that charities are consistent and up to date and that they don't check. So once a charity signs up, if they were good and fine for one time, so it doesn't mean that they're wrong, but it does allow people to move quickly and scale. It is unfortunate that the legal reporting from a donor advised fund does not require the granularity, but that's much more of an issue of who owns data and who gets to own that data for future marketing purposes, which is what charities often rely on. When you do a donation, even if you don't check that box, you may notice a charity may add you to their mailing list, even if you didn't agree to it. And that's because those things are really effective. And those are some of the tools they used when a donor advised fund is incorporated. But it does allow for a lot of movement and a lot of quick ways for companies that are not going to hire resources to scale out teams to manage these programs.
I think that's the difference, though. It's something that you could do if you don't want to manage the resources, but it's not an ideal solution. I mean, I know a couple others have jumped in, and I'll let Lisa and Ashley talk in a second. But I think, one of the issues is that lack of transparency that charities also can't, it's not just about the name and the number, but it's also about allocating that money to the purpose with which it was donated, right? You can move fast, but I don't think there's a comparison as far as pros when it comes to being able to send it into the charity the way that the charity wants it, and then being able to track the money, because from what I've heard, it's costing charities a lot more money to track down these funds and actually what some of the platforms are doing, Twitch included with their charity tool and YouTube, is that it opens up the opportunity for masses, where in Facebook's side, it brought in a lot of money, but it also brings in a lot of problems and a lot of discussion. Lisa, did you want to jump in?
Sure. And Michael and, a lot of other folks know this is one of my absolute favorite topics because I work at Save the Children and we do emergency disaster response. So this kind of, transparency in how we get funds is incredibly important when we've got people that are setting up fundraisers that they want to go to a specific response. So, I mean, that's one of the things where, with the way some of the platforms are set up that people don't realize. For example, on YouTube, we get money in from YouTube, but we can't see who started a fundraiser, for example, right? So like we can't even find people. We can see what they're fundraising for. We can see the fundraising name, but you can't find who set up the fundraiser. So there's no donor or no fundraiser communication there. On the Twitch platform, it's actually the opposite, where we see who has set up a fundraiser, but we don't see what it's for. So we're getting money in. We don't get any notifications in real time. So there's none of that kind of, cultivation and support. We're not able to do that with the fundraisers. We get money in, which is fantastic, but we don't know what the money is supposed to go to. We can kind of guess, when something like this happens, we can kind of say, oh, this is probably, going, these people are probably setting up a fundraiser to support the earthquake, but we don't really know that. And a lot of times it's really hard to find them. So each of these platforms has different reporting mechanisms. And then we have to, one of the things that it does on the back end also is that all of the reporting comes in a slightly different format. So it creates a very manual process for our finance teams to actually upload this into our systems and to be able to have some kind of uniformity in our data that causes, it causes quite a bit of work on the back end, because every single platform that we get money into comes with its whole set of data that is different from other ones. So you have to spend time to convert it to the same Excels and all of that. And that really drives up, in a lot of cases, it drives up our admin costs, because we have to have people to sit there and do that kind of activity.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think those are sort of really important points to make, and understand sort of what the flow of money is and how to get it, especially during a disaster, right? When you want to get it quick. And I know different DAFs have different rules, but I think the standard is somewhere around 30 to 45 days to distribute the funds. So it does take some time to do it. I think, obviously, in my opinion, the best rule of thumb is if you have communication with the charity, or if they have something set up, lean towards what they would like you to use, whether that's Tiltify, whether that's Classy, whether that's Donor Drive, whether that's Streamlabs Charity, whatever it is. It's probably that charity has put some kind of effort into tracking and working with using that system, and probably spent resources and money setting up that tracking. And it could potentially cost them more, obviously, to go around that and do something else. Ash, did you want to jump in?
Basically exactly what Lisa and Spencer were saying about how DAFs can kind of make funds will be coming in 30 to 45 days after an event, and they won't know exactly what those funds were specifically raised for, specifically in the case of the disasters. So Lisa, she talked all about it already.
I would point out that there's a lot of creators who are creating nonprofits with a purpose of fundraising, and whether they file themselves as a donor advised fund, if somebody is fundraising for the efforts to collect money and redistribute, you're going to run into a lot of the same issues. There's several creator-based charities that have spun up so they can fundraise for more charity than at one time. And that's a whole other bucket of things that I think, Michael, you and I have talked about at length.
Yeah.
But just note that creators who create nonprofits for this purpose are effectively, you're running into the same issues. And it's better, when possible, always to donate directly to the nonprofit you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, sending the money directly who you want to get it to is sort of the best way to move forward with all this. Do we see questions, or are there any questions or anything specific that anybody wants us to touch on or move towards?
I'll jump in and say, if you're here and you have a question, if you're on your phone, you can request to speak. We'll bring you in. If you don't want to speak, or if you're on your computer, you can go ahead and type a comment in response to this space, and we'll go ahead and get to that as well.
Cool.
So I actually do have a question, and I think this would be really great for Michael, Allie, and a few of the nonprofits who are in the space. How am I, as a donor or a fundraiser, what are the best resources at hand for me to vet a nonprofit, as well as the platforms in which they choose to activate on?
Good question. Spencer, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I would just say, obviously, great question, because the transparency, again, and accountability, very important in this call. So I would say that the tools we have available to us, that most people I recommend, is Charity Navigator, Charity Watcher, really in-depth looks at most charities that are going to give you a pretty transparent view of how they handle their money, how they handle how transparent are they as an organization in general. Are they keeping their books open and publicly viewable? Are they they financially stable? Are they having have they been bankrupt before, or anything like that comes up? And those are the two tools that I usually recommend to people to look at any foundation or charity. And then actually, the second part of your question was how to know which tool to use to give to the charity. Is that what you're saying?
It's more so for the fundraiser and the donor. What are the best tools, and what should I be looking out for from a platform standpoint of fundraising for X charity through the platforms such as Tiltify? What are some
Okay.
of the things that donors and fundraisers should look out for within the terms of service? If they're not collecting my data, then there's potentially fees. If they
Sure.
are collecting their data, then they're potentially selling my data in terms of not collecting fees, etc.
Yeah, and that I think it also goes back to Noah's point originally too about, I mean, this is from the creator side of reading contracts, reading documents, and if you're not comfortable reading them, obviously pass them on to a professional or even at least somebody who can look at them and kind of explain them a little more. But when just looking at the tools in general too, I think when you go to Tiltify site, for instance, and you see the terms and conditions, and you can read through the way that things are handled. And I hate to keep saying this word again, but transparency is obviously very important. And I think a lot of the tools that are available right now are pretty transparent as is. I think the one issue we're running into right now with this whole soft giving debacle is that in retrospect, people are seeing that soft giving wasn't very transparent. It is an issue of, Tiltify says up front, I think, Michael, 3 to 5% for the fees. Is that correct? For the just in general, for
Yeah,
the processing fees? Yeah.
3.5 to 5.
Um,
Yep.
3.5. Okay, yes, 3.5 to 5% for the processing fees are pretty general. And then any program is going to have any software any company uses, whether it be a charity or a for-profit company, is going to have initial fees to set up and maintain databases and whatnot throughout the year. But that's the industry standard, and that's what we're kind of used to at this point. And ethically, I think that's a fair way to go about doing it. I think it's almost like a lack of information is really what you're looking out for. And when you look at soft giving and being told there are 0% fees, everything is, the way, I mean, we talked before, they word it very, specifically, and they word it very, I don't say lawyery, Noah, but they word it very lawyery, to avoid any issues, and saying that the fees are 0% platform fees, but of course in the back end it's actually a marketing fee or whatever. So I think really it just comes down to the transparency of the major thing you look at, and then you can get more into the nitty gritty and the granularity of terms and conditions, how they handle data, how they handle donations themselves specifically, who it goes through, they go through DAFs, things like that.
Yeah, I think people have to also think through, if something says 0,
Right.
how are they getting paid?
Yes.
We live in a capitalistic society. Everyone is getting paid somehow. You can't function, and you get what you pay for. Like, do you want to
Yeah.
eat a free hamburger? Like, obviously it costs money to make good tools, and
Sure.
there's a balance and a sort of a market. But if something is 0, you have to wonder where they're making money from.
Well, yeah, and also that
Morale.
point too. Yeah, I mean, they're giving away so many things. There's giveaways that are happening. There are marketing is taking place on social media and in other platforms too, and that doesn't happen. I mean, I'm sorry, like me being baffled, that doesn't happen on tips. I mean, that the tips that I've never given a tip to the platform I've donated money through
Which,
personally.
by the way, I just have to say this, and then I'll let Morale jump in.
Yeah.
Personally, and I'm actually writing an article about this, I despise the tip function for 2 reasons. I think, one, I don't like how most of them, not all, there's some that are better, most of them are defaulted to like 15%, and people don't notice it, and it takes 3 to 4 clicks to change it, which I find very shady. And like, from my perspective, if a donor wants to pay $10, a donor should pay $10, not be like, oh, why is it now $11.50? I'm just not a fan of that concept. I don't, if you take money to run your business, charge the money that you need to run your business and let people decide if they want to do it or not. But I find tips kind of like a weird way of trying to bet against people not noticing, like how companies assume you won't cancel your Netflix account or whatever thing you're doing every month. Sorry, Morale, why don't you jump in? I know you've waited in the chat.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Thanks to Michael for putting this together. I'm staying so far away from software. I didn't even know they had this tip functionality. That's absurd. But I wanted to ask a question to Noah, actually. We were talking about influencers getting compensated before, and if an influencer declines payment towards themselves and instead want that to go to the cause and fundraiser, whether it is in their name or not, does that need to be disclosed?
Yeah, fantastic question. So in that particular case, I would say that if you were directing whoever's paying to donate to the charity in your name or on your behalf, you are actually receiving some sort of benefit from that, even if it's very negligible. So I would disclose that. Now, the way that it was set up with soft giving was you still had to sign the contract anyways, and it would effectively go to you and then to the charity. So you would definitely receive that directly. Keeping also in mind when we're talking about, being offered funds that you then redirect to the charity, if you receive those funds, then that is a taxable income event for you. It is always better for funds to go directly to the charity, because if you can be identified as the guardian of those funds at any point, then you're going to have to report that to the federal government, and that's not fun.
That is like literally the use case that we created Tiltify around when we started building it in 2013, was watching people try to fundraise for charity outside of like people like Games on Quick, who had sort of figured out some options. Most people were taking it into their own PayPal account and then sending it to the charity after, which, obviously, like you were saying, opens up a ton of problems. Allie, then we'll jump to Valerie.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to answer Ash's question around how to identify if a charity is impactful. First and foremost, I want to highlight that Charity Watch, Charity Navigator, and GuideStar do not measure impact, because there is no singular way to measure impact. If somebody is providing food to people versus housing, those cost metrics are vastly different. And the way these systems are set up and structured often keep nonprofits founded by people of color from being able to establish their own 501c3s, and they end up working with a fiscal sponsor. For example, during the time of George Floyd, when I was at Twitch and I was working with, the Tiltify team, we were reaching out to tons of nonprofits that were founded by Black individuals. However, most of them were onboarded through a fiscal sponsor, and a fiscal sponsor is the official 501c3. So I want to say that while these systems, maybe they started out as intended, were really great at one point in time, cause a lot of problems today, including causing nonprofits to not pay as much as they should for the work that their employees do, including keeping them understaffed. There's many articles around people who work at nonprofits who are also on food stamps and public assistance. I encourage you to look those things up. Sometimes the answer is not as simple as go look at this one resource for somebody else to say yes or no around if the nonprofit is impactful. I would look at their site. Are they clear in the language they use? Or do they use really flowery language that is not clear? Do they post their impact reports that showcase how many people they helped? And use your critical thinking skills to look and say, all right, well, the work they do is actually really expensive. They help build houses. They raised X. So it makes sense that they helped, 100 people in comparison to, say, a nonprofit who's a food bank that helped 1,000 people in a given period of time. So that's all I wanted to add to that, just because I see a lot of that discussion coming up, and I think it's really important to know the impact of those systems.
No, I think that's an amazing point. And I remember talking to multiple charities within the past few years that were upset that, I think it was Charity Navigator had changed the way that they calculate. And, it's definitely important to say, those sites are not the end all be all of identifying if a charity is impactful or not. Valerie.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for hosting this. I just had a couple of things. I'm the one that's hosting the Gamers for Trans Rights with 300 other streamers tomorrow.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it's great. Actually, Ash, who's here, has been phenomenally helpful with Tiltify. So shout out, Ash is the best. But I just had a couple of things. I have been getting a lot of stuff from people basically freaking out about this whole soft giving thing, and how does Tiltify handle it? Do you guys have a blanket statement that I can retweet, put out? Sorry if you already said this and I missed it. I entered late. Something that I can send, because I have 300 streamers right now, being oh my God, are we okay? Is this safe? So if you have something like that, that would be great. Another thing is I'm getting a lot of hate saying that I am doing this as a tax write-off, or that all streamers in general are doing this as a tax write-off. And I've made it very clear, like, this does not go into my bank account. I cannot write this off. I don't know if you guys have a blanket statement for that as well. And then another thing I had to say was I did a charity event with Soft Giving last year, and someone messaged me about something similar that has come up this week. And I actually spoke with their legal team at Soft Giving, and they were very, very legal wordage with me about it. And I had my lawyer look it over. And so I don't really know what's going on there, but like I spoke with their legal team, and they tried to reassure me that everything was fine. And now I'm feeling like really weird about that. But basically, do you have a statement that I can give to the 300 streamers that are involved with Gamers for Trans Right charity event tomorrow? Is there a statement?
Absolutely.
Is there a statement defending that? No, I'm not getting paid, and I'm not getting a tax write-off for that. And that's all I had to say. But thank you for hosting this. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and I'll answer all your questions, and then if you want to follow up with Ash and me, I'm happy to write something down and email it to you after it's done. But to answer your question, sort of here in front of everybody, so a couple things. One, I think it's unfortunate that what happened over the last few days has kind of eroded the trust, kind of like set us back a little bit. And it sucks because the byproduct is people like yourself getting, harassed and asked the questions. I actually, if you look at, and I'll send you this, you don't have to go dig it up, but I actually put a chart on my Twitter yesterday that basically outlined how Tiltify works money. And basically, so from our side, the big difference between Tiltify on our side and, Soft Giving, even GoFundMe and Twitch Charity and a bunch of others is we do not send the money through a donor advised fund, which is sort of the middleman. So in Soft Giving's example, they would send money to Giving A, and then from Giving A, it would go to the charity. And that, may or may not have been the problem, but it adds in another avenue that's hard to decipher and obviously takes away from transparency. Tiltify, what happens on our site is, so the charity that you're raising money for, they have gone into their account on Tiltify and they have directly connected their PayPal or Stripe accounts directly to our system. And when somebody makes a donation, hypothetically, let's say it's $10, that $10 goes to, let's say it's PayPal, that $10 goes to their PayPal account. Let's say, so we take, depending on the charity, between 3.5% and 5%, depending on the charity. Let's say your charity is 5% in the example. So someone would donate $10, and then that $10 would go to the charity's account, and then the payment, let's say it's PayPal, would do essentially a simultaneous transaction that sends 50 cents to us. And that's how it works. And I know on this call is Lisa from Save the Children and Zach from Gamers Outreach and a bunch of other clients. I mean, if there's anything that any of you want to add to that that I'm missing, these are clients who use us to do the fundraising, but happy to send you that. And obviously, the money doesn't go through you. The best way to tell, by the way, to sort of answer this question, and this is something I've been pointing out, not that I like saying their name over and over, but this is something I've been pointing out about Soft Giving forever, is when you donate to Soft Giving, the receipt you get says Soft Giving. It says you sent money to Soft Giving. When you donate on Tiltify, if you donate, let's say, to Save the Children, the receipt you get is from and says Save the Children, which is, to me, the way it needs to go. People need to be sending their money directly to the charities.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Is there also one more thing? I know you said you already
Sure.
have a list, and I would love to see that. Is there a way for me to best explain, like, one sentence, how Tiltify gets paid? Because I'm getting that question over and over.
Yeah. So we get paid 3.5% to 5%, depending on the charity, but let's say it's 5% to take the worst case scenario. We get paid 5%. So if $10 is donated, we get paid 50 cents.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I did want to chime in here as well. I know that Alyssa and Spencer already kind of talked on it as well, but there was one resource that I think that wasn't brought up that donors and fundraisers have at their fingertips, specifically for U.S. organizations. If you go to the irs.gov, you could search up your nonprofit and look up their returns. Through those returns, you are able to see what their programs have gone, where the money has gone for their CEOs and other and other paid top executives. So that is I feel like one of the most underused tools that people don't know that they have access to. So I just wanted to kind of put that out for transparency, on top of looking at additional ones like Charity Navigator and such. You have those additional tools at your fingertips to look at kind of where funds are going for said organizations.
I just want to add that people's salary gets added under administrative costs, but without those people to run those programs would not exist. And the other thing I want to add to that is that soft giving is the thing that's mentioned because that's the discussion today, but that is not the only company in this space that is operating in those ones. It's the only one, to my understanding, that tried to hide that's how they operate, but it's not the only one in this space that does so.
I just wanted to jump in to comment on something that Ash had said, and this is just as FYI because I was looking it up recently. A lot of the charity 990s on the IRS, it's really out of date right now. So just as an FYI. So one of the better ways to look is on the nonprofit's website, because they should be hopefully posting it on their website. There was a nonprofit I was trying to look up, realized it was, their last one was from like 2019. So then I went to look up Save the Children's. Ours is also the last one I think on there is from 2019, but you can absolutely find it very easily on our website. So it's, I think the IRS website is just kind of delayed in that.
Thanks, Lisa. Maggie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hi. Can y'all hear me? I'm on my headset mic, so I hope it's working.
Yep.
Awesome. I am the peer-to-peer and community giving manager for Project Hope. So I would like to touch on what Allie and Ash also mentioned, and actually everyone. When it comes to transparency of a charity, ask the charity. I highly suggest asking them for any information they have on their recent activity, on what they've done, what they do. And if they give you the information, great, awesome. Pick their brains, ask them as much as possible. At Project Hope, one of our biggest goals is to encourage everyone, and I know that there are tons of other charities in this chat, that encourage everyone to communicate, to ask questions, to ask the hard questions that they don't think charities will want to answer. And if they give you those answers, fantastic. If they don't, then I think that is an answer all in its own. But yeah, thank you so much for hosting this discussion. It has been fantastic to listen to everyone, be here together and share this peer space.
Awesome. Thank you. Spencer, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I also just kind of wanted to agree there with the idea that transparency and just talking to the charities is very important because to your point, if you do ask the questions, you should get a straightforward answer. If you ask what is A, they should say A is this. They shouldn't say, well, B and C do these things, but we don't do that. So I think really the critical thinking comes into that as well. As Alyssa was saying earlier, just using your common knowledge to say, all right, I asked a question, I got this answer, but it wasn't any direct answer. And then, of course, resources that are online available from third-party tools, like we mentioned before, with the Navigator and the Charity Watch. But again, just from the government tools that are available to the IRS, assuming they're updated, of course, as we just talked about, but from the charities' websites and just being open with them and saying, I have a question, what is the answer to the question? And I think that a lot of times people get the idea that they're going to be lied to or misled by organizations, whether they be charities or not, or for-profit companies. So the idea is that what third-party tool can I use? But really, the best source for a lot of that is going to be going straight to the organization and just saying, hey, what is the answer to this question? And of course, there is the fear that they could be lying to me. That's very true, but that's when the critical thinking comes in and just saying, I asked a question, you gave an answer. I, at some point, have to trust that the truth is out there and I'm accepting the truth. Not to bring X-Files into this, but you have to just accept at some point that someone's telling you the truth. So I think that just bringing that question up to those organizations is very important. So yeah, just asking, and it really comes down to, as Alyssa was saying, to the impact is so hard to measure, and it is charity by charity, organization by organization. So just thinking about when you're getting responses from these organizations or these third parties, weighing the information that you already have into that, and just trying to ask the critical questions that are very straightforward that you can then pass on to your donors and people supporting your fundraiser. And also, just to touch on Valerie's question before as well about, I know this is a very common thing people still get fundraising, especially in charity streaming, of how do I know you're not making a tax write-off? I mean, we know how taxes work. If I give $100 to charity, I'm not getting $110 back in my pocket. So that to me is always like a nonsensical question people ask fundraisers, and I'm just like, what do you? This isn't a Ponzi scheme, but all right. And anyway, that's what I would tell them, Valerie.
Yeah, there's a lot of craziness. I see we have a new speaker as well, Monica. Did you want to jump in and ask a question?
Yeah, hi, quick question. I just wanted to know, based off of being mentioned earlier, this 3 and 5%, how does Tiltify determine what the payout or cost is for Tiltify being taken? Is it based off of charity's size or operating budget, or what?
Like, you
I was
mean
just curious.
whether it's 3.5 or 5,
Yeah,
or just in general?
just in general, mostly. Like, how do you determine, like, for different charities? Because you have some huge charities on Tiltify, and then you have some very, very small ones as well. So I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. So any charity can join Tiltify without any kind of setup or implementation fee. So you can join for free, and the default is 5%. And that's what the majority of charities pay. And the majority of charities also use our site for free. Then there are charities that we work with that want to get, we have additional features that we built that are more complex, or integrations with platforms like Salesforce that charities use to move data and calculate, be able to track their fundraisers or constituent information. Someone may want to, get sort of a custom page built. We do custom development for some of our clients. So it really depends. The ones who tend to pay less are clients that usually just do a lot of volume on us, and that also gives them the leverage to pay less.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. I think we have another speaker connecting. Is Kenley connecting? I think he is. I think he's connecting slowly. And feel free, I know my team is collecting some questions from chats and comments.
Yeah, I want to jump in to say that a lot of the resources that have been talked about, such as Michael's chart yesterday, and then the IRS website, Mocha Jones, one of our co-workers here at Tiltify, has been posting all of them in comments to the space. So if you need to access any of those, you can check those out.
Cool. That's awesome. Kenley, how's it going? You're muted. Maybe you don't know you're muted. All right. Well, we'll see if he gets a chance to jump in. Any big topics that anybody wants to toss out that we haven't touched on yet? I know we've been on for like an hour. I'm happy to keep talking more about whatever anybody wants to chat about, but
I got a question.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Kenley.
Hi, Michael. So, as someone who helps broadcasters organize events for charities in Seattle, what are the kinds of questions you would encourage broadcasters and their communities and the folks that support them to ask fundraising platforms and charities to ensure that the money is like the money raised, and everything that is done is going to the right place and in the right mind and supporting the right people?
Sure, that's a good question. I'll answer, and then I'll let some of the others on here because I'm sure people may have additional answers and information. I'd say the best place to start to figure out like a platform is go to the charity's website. A lot of organizations will have a section on their website that says something like "Get involved" or "Fundraise." I've always wished it would be a little bit clearer with some of them. I've said this, but usually you can find they'll sort of direct you like, oh, hey, did you want to fundraise? Do you want to join our walks? Click here, and it'll send you to the platform that they use for walks. Some of them will say, do you want to fundraise for live streaming or on Tiltify? That might send you there. They might have other things. So I'd say that's a good first place to start, because if they have something there, that certainly makes it easy to see that they're available. I think the other important thing to think about is there a DAF involved? So we talked a while about this. I don't know if you were here, but we talked about donor advised funds. Those are
I'm aware of those
middleman companies, right? So, whether it's PayPal Giving Fund or Giving A, I think to think about, are they using that? The reason why I bring that up is to say that if they use a DAF, the charity may not be directly involved in the fundraising initiative. And we were talking before that it might be difficult for them to track the money. In Tiltify's case, as an example, if you go on our site, if you can find the charity in the search, the only way that's happening, with one or two exceptions that we've done in emergencies, is that the charity themselves has signed up and put in their payment details into our system themselves. We have no way of doing that without them. So I'd say those are some key elements to look for. I see Ash wants to jump in as well. Go ahead, Ash.
Oh no, it's more so that somebody did bring up a question, actually on the graph that you put out yesterday. So I just wanted to kind of seed that question in here. But they asked, what is the flow of money from your platform fee? Is it sent back to you by the charity after receipt of the full amount? If not, how is the flow different from a donor advised fund?
So it's, so a donor advised fund essentially sends the money from you, the donor, to the donor advised fund, from the donor advised fund to the charity. So there's A to B, B to C. Tiltify, for that example, goes A to C. There's no donor advised fund, so the money is going. So if a charity connects their Stripe account or PayPal account, Stripe is a credit card processor, they connect their account to Tiltify. Let's say our fee in the example is 5%. What happens is someone donates $10. That $10 goes to the charity's Stripe account or PayPal account, not ours. And what happens is then when it gets there, there's a sort of simultaneous fee that bumps back our 50 cents to an account of ours. So it essentially is like, it's a little bit different in Stripe and a little bit different in PayPal, but essentially the money goes into the charity's account and then the processor automatically makes the split. All right. Any other? Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is a good time that if anyone has any last minute questions that they want to jump in and go ahead and ask them. And then even afterwards, after this ends, if you continue to have questions, go ahead and comment them on this, and we will definitely see what we can do to make sure that they all get answered.
Sure. I see that Allie wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I'm actually asking this question on behalf of someone else who's a little bit shy, but they wanted to know, they really enjoyed this space, and what they wanted me to ask if Tiltify was planning or thinking about hosting Twitter Spaces in the future, or if they just would, mostly about to talk about how the product works, to collect product feedback. They'd love to be a part of those conversations.
Oh, I think that's a great idea.
I can answer that. That's kind of my area. Yeah, so if you don't know, person speaking behind the Tiltify icon, I am Izzy. I handle our social media. I'm also on our community team. So we have been trying to do some Discord hours. If you want to jump in with our community manager, Miss Ash Rocks, and then also Mocha Jones, especially with our new dashboard that we just launched. We want to make sure that all questions are answered. We do try to do monthly recaps here on Twitter Spaces that we like to open up the floor. And if anyone has any questions, that's another great place to do it. But yeah, we're definitely open to doing more frequent Twitter Spaces, even at this capacity, seeing who would be interested. And either way, however you wish to ask us questions, whether it's Discord, Twitter Spaces, Twitter comments, we are happy to answer them no matter what.
We actually just got another question that I want to go ahead and put in here. Y'all mentioned that in emergencies, charities can appear in your search without adding themselves. Can you comment more on how that system works in emergency settings?
Yes. So we have used the PayPal Giving Fund, which is the system that Twitch Charity uses as well. We've used it in the past for one or two emergencies where we have a massive demand for an organization. The organization is part of the PayPal Giving Fund. They don't have time to get signed up. And some of them will ask us to send the money there in this particular instance. It's rare. I think we've done it 3 times in our existence. But it is sort of what we use that for in the times when you got to get something up in like, an hour, and you don't have any charity that, touches on that cause and people want to fundraise ASAP, or they may not at all.
Awesome. And maybe a little follow-up question. Can organizations utilize PayPal Giving Fund on Tiltify in general?
They can. We kind of discourage it. I think we let like one charity do it. We just don't like it. There's a lot of like added legal and stuff, and it's very like obviously then you're donating through PayPal specifically, which is not as nice a transition as donating through Stripe, which I think is just a better processor. If they really want, there's one charity that I can think of, I'm not going to name them, but that like literally there's insisted on it because they couldn't get internal approval for it takes them 6 months to approve another processor. So while they were doing that, they're like, we don't want to not be on Tiltify. So can you do this? I mean, in that case, we will, but we don't love it because it then again adds the same lack of transparency issue. And I think we have a new speaker that had jumped in, Playing for Joey's.
Exactly is my name. I jumped in on my phone so I could ask a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Question is, with the main topic being transparency and accountability, I was wondering, is there anything you're planning to bring to Tiltify to sort of improve on that a little bit? One of the things that I've noticed with some other similar platforms is when you do a donation, you can offset fees and that on the donation page. Would you ever consider something like that in future?
Yeah, it's something we've talked to some charities about. Transparently, I go back and forth on whether I like it. I kind of have this mentality, which, may be just something that's to me, but I feel like if someone wants to donate $10, we should only take $10. I don't love the idea of asking them for more, which is why I don't like tipping. But it's definitely something that we hear about. And if enough of our clients, meaning the charities, really wanted us to add it, we definitely would think about it. But to be honest, out of our client, and a bunch of them are on here, so I wonder if they're going to ask me after. But we don't get asked for it a lot.
I would just add, a lot of people think about nonprofits as only doing good, but as we talked about at the beginning of the call, nothing is for free. We live in a primarily capitalist system, no matter where you're at in the world. And charities are a function of capitalism. If all of our systems were set up to take care of people and to respond to disasters and do these research, like every nonprofit person I talk to, like their hope is that they can go out of business, but they're there to solve a need that doesn't exist. So as part of that, it's expected that, even though it's a not-for-profit business, it's still a business that they'll have some expenses. That's just another way to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's something that also maybe isn't as, and I won't go into it in detail, but just to touch on it, I think there's sometimes in the public, I think there's a concept that you send money to a charity and like all of that money goes to the thing and they don't have costs. And I know we touched on like salaries before. Personally, I'm a firm believer. It's like if you have a children's hospital or someone at Doctors Without Borders, like we're trying to cure cancer or help people in emergency. I'd say like let's like those, to me, those are the people that should get paid a lot of money. To sort of, sometimes people are like, oh, you work for charity, you should be like poverty line level payment. I think people have to realize that like charities do have to run, and you want really good people to be at a charity to like Ali was saying, make that charity hopefully obsolete by doing what they do. So I think also just generally people have to sometimes people look a lot at like administrative costs too and different things, and charities do spend a lot of money on technology and software and staff, but it's all to try to make this the money they get more efficient. And I think that's definitely something that everyone has to kind of keep in mind, that these are people that have lives and careers and are doing a good thing. It's sort of like, I always think it's backwards too. It's like we don't pay firefighters and nurses and different people as much, and teachers are like really poorly paid, and people at charities. I think one day in a perfect world that would be the opposite.
And I'll also kind of chime in there and just remind everybody that charities are highly regulated. And so as a result, they have, accompanying legal costs and maintenance costs. And on that end, we represent a ton of charities at our firm and other nonprofits as well. And while we help them out wherever we can, there's just certain filing fees and things that they just can't get around because it's going to be owed to the state or federal government. So keep in mind that there are a lot of expenses that don't go directly towards the mission, but are like mission critical to keep the thing open.
Yeah, I mean, some charities have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, just to be able to have the right to ask for donations around the country.
It can be simply summed up as you get what you pay for. If you're a highly skilled individual and you're shopping for a job, people are less likely to go work for a nonprofit where highly skilled people would be very, very needed. So just keep that in mind when you're evaluating nonprofits or calling them out about their administrative costs, because it just contributes to a further poverty problem, honestly.
Yeah, I saw a lot of talk about that, obviously, in the last few days. People would be like, oh, the CEO of this charity gets X and the CEO of that charity. And sometimes I'll look at that and be like, honestly, that CEO runs $1 billion charity that's, helping a lot of people and running really efficiently. If they were a for-profit company, that person would be getting paid 20 times what they're getting paid. I think everyone has to be kind of like realistic on what you want. I definitely want like the best doctor trying to cure leukemia, not the cheapest. Anyone else have any questions or want to jump in? Cool. Well, if not, we can probably wrap it up. We've been on for...
Yeah, one more from Smirky, our friend.
Oh, sure.
Hey.
All right, we'll wait for
Hey,
Smirky.
can you hear me? Are you guys able to hear me?
Hey, Smirky.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Hi. First of all, thank you so much for hosting this space. This has been like really informative, and I've been learning a lot on my end. So, this has been really great. I guess I don't know, just a little bit of a curiosity to Michael. I guess if you could surmise like one key takeaway that you're learning yourself from this very space, what would you say that is?
That I'm learning from the Twitter space here?
Yeah.
Oh. I mean, I think there's not too much that I guess I'd say I've like of information. I mean, other than some of the legal stuff from Noah that, you know, isn't stuff that probably like me and a lot of the charity folks here talk about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just one of the things that I think was probably interesting that was a learning is that we need a lot more education. Like when I think it was Valerie who jumps on before and was saying that people still hit up certain creators and say like, oh, are you pocketing the money and what are you doing with this? I mean, I get that it exists, but I'm at the same time a little surprised that still happens. And, you know, I also wonder why that still happens, if people are still doing that and that's sort of like poisoning the well for others or not. But I'd say that's probably my key takeaway, just even from the last like 2 days, is that, you know, it's on, you know, us at Tiltify and other platforms to do as much as we can to help educate people on, you know, what to look for. I mean, if you don't know the red flags of a soft giving, then, you know, it's, you know, I guess it's hard to blame you for using it if we haven't done a good enough job of putting the information out there to help you have the tools to know that that's not a good platform to use.
Okay, I just wanted to ask for your insight on that. So thank you for shedding insight. I absolutely agree that I think, you know, as much as we know about like the charity streaming space, there's still so much for us to learn, and there's so many opportunities for us to help others learn. So I think that's very important. So thank you for your insight.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I've been asked, I think 4 times today, how Tiltify makes money. And, you know, I felt like it's in our FAQs, it's in our terms of service, but clearly it's not clear enough because I got asked it 4 times today. So,
Michael,
you
I
know,
want
we're just learning that the education needs to be more.
Since I feel like I can say this because I don't work at Tiltify and I don't work at Twitch, but creators, I encourage you to read more. Read Tiltify's page, read the charity's page. A lot of this is going and asking somebody a question, but a lot of this information is publicly available in all of the right places, including how Tiltify makes money.
Lisa, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I think one of the things I wanted to mention, because I know this all came up, even though, you know, it's kind of been brewing for a little while, and it popped up partially, like one of the reasons that let it brew for a bit, one was sort of, you know, some legal stuff that potentially some nonprofits were facing. But I think a lot of it also is a lot of us, and I'm going to speak for a lot of nonprofits here, so I apologize if this is not reflective of your opinion, but a lot of us don't like sticking our heads in controversies. We don't like raising the red flag. And so it's one of those things where, like, you know, we kind of knew there was some stuff going on, but we don't want to be like, this is not why we want our nonprofit's name out there. We want our nonprofit's name and our brand to be out there because of the good work that we're doing, because of what we're able to accomplish. So most nonprofit folks don't want to be speaking up and saying, look, this, you know, there's a problem with this kind of thing, especially since we also, I think a lot of nonprofits didn't have all the information. And there was just sort of like an egregiousness of the level of what was going on that kind of popped up, and that really tipped it over the balance, where there's, you know, you see some like little things and you can give advice, but you don't really, it's not like bad enough to really stop and say, hold on, this is really, really bad. And this time this was really honestly shockingly bad from a nonprofit perspective, that, you know, like really, really bad. And I think that was enough to make a lot of nonprofits say, look, this has been a problem for a while, and it's worth, at this point, when you see that kind of legal document and what other nonprofits are being held to, it's worth to say something. But this isn't normally what I think from the nonprofit side, this isn't normally what we like spending on our time on. I know it's, for me personally, this isn't what I like spending my time on. I like, talking about our programs, and, I'll echo what some of the other folks have said from a nonprofit perspective. We love talking about what our programs are. If you're talking to a good nonprofit and you're asking questions, you probably can't get us to shut up about the work that we're doing, because we love being asked. We love talking about it. That's why we work where we do. And so for sure, asking nonprofits, checking the websites, that kind of thing.
Noah, if you don't mind chiming in here to talk about phrases like tortious interference and legal liability around sharing information that through a whisper network that's not public information, I think that would probably be good. A lot of creators probably don't think about that, but everyone in a professional day-to-day job definitely thinks about that, myself included.
Yeah, happy to chime in there. And so in terms of, so there's a lot of terms that are coming out here. So if someone is saying, hey, you shouldn't sign this contract, hey, this is a bad business relationship, you should breach this contract, that kind of thing, you could potentially be liable for tortious interference, which means illegally interfering with someone else's contract. You also want to make sure as a creator that you're not, or as a nonprofit, quite frankly, that you're not engaging in defamation, which is illegal disparagement. And you also want to make sure that you're not, sharing confidential information that you are bound to keep confidential. Now, if you haven't signed an NDA and you're just sharing something else that's public, and obviously, we all remember Josh's Santa Dev's thread from yesterday, that he was sharing something that he saw. It's not something that he directly received, so he was not breaching any confidence there. If you are sharing something that is already out there in the public, there's not necessarily any sort of confidence that you are breaching unless you have signed an agreement that prevents you from doing that. So creators, it's really important to remember that while nonprofits might want to speak up or might not want to work with a particular platform, they might be contractually obligated to. And so I know that I've spoken to a lot of nonprofits who are in a situation like that, and they're trying to get out of them. And also I've spoken to creators who are trying to get out of their contracts with a certain platform. And it's a tricky situation. So while we are rightfully having a good discourse about this and we want to see immediate change, because of the unfortunate realities of the legal system, we might not see changes with certain creators or nonprofits immediately because they have to follow their obligations. And especially with a company that is historically as litigious, as happy to go sue people as the one that we have discussed, then it's important to be super careful around that. Does that kind of answer what you were looking for there, Alyssa?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that brings in just an interesting point in general too, that I can a lot of us that are on this call sort of, this is kind of the unfortunate thing, knew people or had spoken to people or people had confided in us that like, oh, I have these problems, or I've worked with this company, or this is sort of sketchy and I don't know what to do about it, or what about this, or like Lisa was saying, charities don't want to get involved. They don't, it's just, it's a tricky thing. And like, I don't know, hopefully all of this maybe will find a way. And I know it's sort of difficult and, it's hard for me. Like, for example, I knew stuff, but if I went on Twitter as like, patient zero and said, this is what I've heard. One, I didn't have a contract to point to, so I couldn't say like definitively, but even if someone had given me one and I said, look, I have this thing now, it still would be coming from me. And my concern was like, it'll always be me being biased because I run Tiltify. So, the argument could easily be, well, that's perceived as a competitor. I'm only doing it because of that. But, it's something that's been probably frustrating and brewing for a while. And it's, I think those legal agreements that are stopping people from talking. And I've talked to charities, honestly, who have confided to me that they've lost significant money working with the other company. And, it's frustrating to hear it. after all this. So I'm hoping that this chat, and if we, we should do this more, let's do this more, like whatever we need to do to, make people feel comfortable fundraising for charities, because there's a lot going on. And there's a lot of organizations that, need help for great reasons.
I also don't want to chime in real quick with one more thing, since we have expressly referenced the contract that was leaked yesterday and boosted, the one that is the subject of all this controversy. On page 9 of that agreement, there is a law firm identified and a specific name. I want to make sure everyone that is listening here understands and can also identify out there. I know that law firm. They are just down the street from me, actually. And I have a great relationship with them. And I can confirm that they draft templates for soft giving to spec as requested. And they had nothing to do with any of the percentages or anything like that in there. So please don't think ill of them if you do see that name.
I will neither confirm nor deny that I had any confided information to the situation. Wink, wink.
Yeah. I don't know. We need like a bat signal when something's going on. Ash? Or you're just doing an emoji?
I was doing my bat symbol.
So, all right. Well, I think, do we have anything else to chat about? It's been about 90 minutes. I think this has been a pretty amazing discussion. I'm actually surprised and excited how many, I don't really get to talk about a lot of this stuff. Like no one really has this discussion. There's like very few people. I mean, a lot of them that I talk to are on this call, but it's kind of like a rare discussion. So, maybe the good that came out of all this is that we're now having this discussion, and maybe we can have it more, and make sure that, we continue the transparency and accountability.
I don't want to speak out of turn, and I know that I totally just jacked the mic, but Michael, I think I want to speak on behalf of everyone when I say that we would love to hear you talk more. Actually, everyone in this space, being, a peer-shared information is the best. So please talk more, Michael.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who contributed. I really appreciate everyone jumping on and speaking and lending your knowledge and input and brain power to help. And, hopefully we can all keep working together to create much more positivity to sort of overcome what's happened in the few days, and, keep raising money for the things that really need our attention. So thank you, everybody.
I'm going to echo that and say thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been a pleasure and very refreshing to just kind of have this transparency talk. Again, all resources that have been mentioned have been added to the comments of this Twitter Spaces. This has been recorded, so if you want to listen to it or have any questions that were discussed, you can listen to it again. And yeah, we are accessible all the time on Twitter, our Discord, everywhere. And yeah, I like the idea of doing this more often too, so. But with that, thank you, everybody. And again, if you still have questions, feel free to comment them below. So thank you.